Is it okay to record 2, maybe even 3 voice tracks that are all on individual or isolated tracks so that you can publish the most perfect podcast? I'll answer that coming up next. Hey there, podcaster. My name is Shannon, radio broadcaster, podcaster, and podcast producer. Today, we're talking about multi-tracking and whether or not it is more beneficial to you as the podcaster and editor in the long run. And I'm going to share with you a couple of philosophies on whether it's going to be good for you or bad for you. I'm not going to say that it's bad or it's good. I'm just going to share some ideas with you so that you can get a better understanding of whether or not multi-tracking is good for you, okay? Now, before we jump into it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on this particular channel. Thank you so much for checking out this channel. I really appreciate it, and hit that bell notification so you can get notified exactly when I drop a brand new video. And for you beginning podcasters out there, I have an essential equipment guide that will share with you the equipment that I am using to create not only this video but my podcast as well, and the software that I'm using to edit also my podcast. You're going to see some of that in today's video, so don't fret. So today we are talking all about using multi-tracking and recording multi-tracking for your podcast. Now, where we're running into this is we're running into it with softwares and hardwares that are out there, and I'm just going to name a couple. So we're talking about maybe the Zoom H6 recorder. It's a hand recorder, and within the Zoom H6 you can record not only your voice track, but you can record your guests as an individual voice track, so that whenever you pull the audio files and dump them back onto your computer, you get 2 files. You get your voice and you get someone else's voice, and then that's when you dump it into your DAW, your digital audio workstation, and then you match up the audio so that you can clean up the sound the best that you can. All right, so that's one way that you can do that. You can also do the same exact thing with the Zoom video conferencing software that is out there that is so popular right now. You can do the exact same thing on there, or you can do it on other software, say like Zencastr. Zencastr does the exact same thing. Now, I don't know where this thing came from, where people said they have to absolutely be recording 2 individual audio tracks, because that's not how I learned, and it's not exactly what we are doing at the radio station when it comes down to isolating tracks. We only do it in one particular instance, but that instance is very rare in which we are using it. So I want to share with you some philosophies on when it's a good time to use that, all right? So we are talking about like the Zoom H6, Zoom video conferencing, and Zencastr. Now, these give you the ability to not only host the audio, but it gives you the ability to really manipulate the audio itself. You can do some compressions on there. You can put some filters on there. You can put equalizations, gains, whatever you want to put on those pieces of audio. But at the end of the day, it's going to take you a long time to really go through that audio if you're being very particular. Now, let's go through some of the pros of whether or not this is good. Okay, so let's talk about the pros. Now, you're capturing the best audio, and you're able to process it in post-production. All right, so that's going to be the best way that you could do that. You're also going to be able to edit out unwanted sounds. So let's say that one of your guests had a crying child in the background, and one of your other guests had maybe a train that was passing by every 5 minutes. You could definitely go into those individual tracks and you can take out those pieces of audio, so it doesn't really distract from the final product of what you're trying to publish. All right, now the cons is that you're going to be spending far more time editing out the unwanted sounds than focusing on the content itself. Where I believe, and what my philosophy is that you should be focusing on the content and the value of the content that you're going to be delivering to your audience, as opposed to the unwanted sounds. Because for the most part, let's just put it in real terms, most of us who are podcasters are recording in a bedroom. We're recording where there's a pool outside. We're recording where there's a dog barking in the background, and those are just sounds that you have. Now, if you're recording a storytelling podcast, different story. You probably should be recording in a sound booth where you're going to be acting and you don't want unwanted sounds, all right? It's going to be a little bit different, all right? So you're definitely going to be spending more time editing if you are going to be using this multi-track philosophy, all right? You're also going to be getting more files, and sometimes those files don't sync up, and there's issues there, all right? Now, I want to share with you inside of Adobe Audition today, I want to share with you what I'm talking about when it comes down to unwanted sounds and where it can take more time when it comes down to the editing process. Now, keep in mind, I've told you that I want to spend more time on the content as opposed to the sounds, and you can really fix the sounds if you are preparing ahead of time. If you're preparing your your microphones ahead of time. You're preparing your guest microphone ahead of time. You're preparing everything ahead of time so that when you come into the post-production process, you're not having to go in and fix everything and spend hours and hours fixing everything. All right. So let's jump into Adobe Audition right now. Now, here we have a podcast that I edit. It's called Remarkable People. I'm the editor. The producer is Jeff C. He's part of Social Media Examiner, and this is for Guy Kawasaki's Remarkable People. All right. And this is an old episode that I edited it, and it took, this one actually took me quite some time because there were a lot of unwanted sounds that were in here. And I normally wouldn't do this for anyone other than I would do it for Guy and Jeff, just because Guy is a very busy human being, and so is Jeff, and I don't mind coming in and cleaning up these sounds. I know how to clean these sounds up. All right. So what we're seeing here are two different audios. We're seeing the guest voice track, and then of course we're seeing the Guy voice track. Now, if I go ahead and check out these this piece of audio, this mixed audio, these two pieces of audio right here, we are seeing that Guy's voice right here is really just mainly the questions. He's going to have there's going to be very few pieces of audio here because they're mainly just questions. So he probably asked a question here. He probably asked a question here. Maybe he got into something right here. It's really going to be, you're going to be able to tell who's saying what, all right? But as you can see down here, his guest is the one that is talking. But if you can see or notice just a little bit, if I zoom in here, if I go in a little deeper, you can see right here that there's some pieces of audio like a noise floor or some type of hum that is underneath there. So I want to jump into the piece of audio and see what that is exactly. And I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. This is going to be the mic bleed from his guest into Guy's microphone. So this track right here is specifically Guy's voice track, all right? And if I go ahead and I press play here, you're going to see that it's just his guest mic bleed going over into his microphone. So as a way of reference, or as a point of reference, let's show you what Guy's voice is going to sound like as opposed to what the microphone bleed is going to be.
The majority.
I'm the majority from a fairly powerful family in Hawaii. I could not relate at all to all this, victimization stuff. It was an eye-opening experience for me also.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's amazing that they even talked to you about it, because for years they just never talked.
So as you can see, that is mainly just mic bleed. And what I had to go through in this particular episode is I had to edit out all of the mic bleed. And this can take a lot of time. So I would have to come in here and I would really have to zoom in, and I have to start highlighting and cleaning up and silencing and voluming down, and then coming in, listening more, and then coming in, highlighting and making sure that I'm not cutting any parts of Guy's voice out. And I would have to do this through the entire 30-minute interview. Now, this took me about an hour to complete, to get rid of all of that, but that was just this part. So you're talking like an hour just to complete this particular part. Then when we come in, we go back into multi-track, and if we come into his guest's piece of audio, you can notice that there was a hum. There was a low noise hum that was coming through her microphone. So then I had to go in and start cleaning that up. So if you can hear, let's see here.
My father, of course, as soon as the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the FBI were over the house because he was a fisherman.
So you can hear that. I don't know if you can tell through. You would have to listen probably through headphones, but there was a hum there, and I had to go through and I had to do a little bit of processing. I had to do a lot with this particular interview. All in all, this particular interview probably took me about 3 to 4 hours to complete. And to me, that is just too much time. Like I said, I would do it for Guy and I would do it for Jeff, and I have no problem doing it for them. But as the podcaster, as you, the individual podcaster, if you are not setting this stuff up ahead of time, if you're not looking for or listening for grounds that are coming and bleeding over through the microphone, if you're not listening for dogs, if you can do a lot of this prep ahead of time to make sure that you're getting the best possible sound, you can really just mix it down into one file. And Zoom, the Zoom H6, and I believe Zencaster will all do this for you. I recommend that you always have one file as the final product so that you can go in and edit. Your microphone should be the one that is going to be the best sounding, all right? You're going to have the best sounding piece of equipment that's going to be coming over as the recording. So that's what you want to have, all right? Now, this is really all based in philosophy. Going through and doing a multi-track processing takes hours and hours of time. When I teach my training course, Design a Podcast, I tell people, don't do it with the multi-tracking. Just do it as one. I will share tips and tricks on how you can make the audio sound much better so that you're getting the right decibel decibel level, okay? So that is just something that I personally do on my own. Now, let me just talk about a little bit of philosophies and the editing philosophies behind why I do this stuff, okay? Now, we have to remember that I come from a radio background, so everything that I do is in real time. So when I'm talking to you on YouTube, I'm really it's not that I'm really riffing off of anything. I have notes that I have written down. I reference my notes, and then I can come in and I can talk about those topics. I talk about this all the time with podcasters who find it hard to come up with something to say. But if you have bullet points, you can come in and you can elaborate on those bullet points. So as an example, in this philosophy that we're talking about, and see, this is imperfect as well. We're talking that life is imperfect. Spoken word is imperfect. So why does your podcast have to be perfect all of a sudden? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. When you hear some of the people who you think are doing it perfect, let's look at a Joe Rogan, for example. When you watch his entire podcast on YouTube, or now I think Spotify, or when you listen to any of these podcasts that are interview based, there are discrepancies, there are mistakes, all right? And a lot of the times these are all recorded in real time, and they're not going through and doing a whole lot of editing. Maybe they're doing video editing, but they're not doing a whole lot of audio editing, okay? So that's just something to think about. Spoken word is imperfect. Radio is imperfect. If you're doing an interview style podcast, interviewing and radio is imperfect, okay? Now, imperfection is kind of what gives your program the personality that people will start to really be drawn to, all right? Now, when you listen to someone who's on the radio or listen to a podcaster and you hear how they present over the microphone, you think, God, I want to do it just like them, or I want to sound something similar to what they're doing. And what you got to remember that those people who are doing this, they've done it for quite some time, and they have perfected the art of presenting in front of a microphone or in front of a camera. And you have to remember that they have no problem talking in front of a microphone. They have the confidence to do this. So their imperfection, all of a sudden, I guess, somehow becomes perfect to the eyes or the ears of the listener. So you kind of got to get out of the head of what people will think you sound like or what you should sound like. Just be you, be natural, be the personality of who you can be. So that shines through the microphone so people can be drawn to your personality. Now, as you continue to create your own podcast, again, your performance skills are going to get really, really good to where you won't have to do a whole lot of editing. You won't have to do a whole lot of hand mixing on your mixing board. You're not gonna have to do all of that because you're gonna get used to doing it all over. So that makes the post-production process down the line much easier. In other words, you won't have to record individual tracks. You're just recording one track that is already going to be mixed as the final file that you're going to get from Zoom or Zoom H6 or Zencaster. And then you go through, and then of course you can edit what you need out. If your philosophy is that sounds should not be inside of your podcast, dogs should not be barking, children should not be crying, phones should not be ringing, if that's your philosophy, then yeah, go through and start using the multi-track system. But I don't think that you should have to, just because life is imperfect. And in post-production, if a phone is ringing and it interrupts your podcast, the best thing about podcasting is that, yeah, you are recording it, but you can pause everything that what you're doing, answer the phone or put it to voicemail, come back to it and pick up where you left off. And then in post-production, you can make that edit to where, yeah, it's going to sound a little weird, but you can also let your audience know that that's what ended up happening. Someone called, okay? So everything doesn't have to be perfect. You can have some imperfections there, all right? Now, what I recommend that you do is that you go in and you change the settings to your Zoom H6 or maybe your Zoom voice or video conferencing software, and you go in and you change that to where you're getting just the full mix of the conversation so that when you import it into your DAW, your digital audio workstation, that you can go ahead and just start editing. It'll take way less time, all right? Now, the pros to that is that you have a finalized piece of audio. The cons to that is that if there's some unwanted sounds, you can't go in and you can't fix those. But again, it's going to be more about the personal philosophy on this idea and whether or not you're going to want to spend spend way too much time in an audio editing software, or you just want to get the content out because you feel the content is going to be far more valuable to your listener than it is about the sound. Now, don't get me wrong, sound should be good, but a lot of the sound can be fixed on this side of it all. You can set your microphone to sound up great. You can get your mixing board to be set perfect. You can get your guest call to sound loud enough, because when you take it back into audio, the audio editing software, you can go ahead and do some refining in that, and you can go ahead and do some improvements on the audio at the end of the day. I tell you, I get really passionate about this just because I think that podcasters, they overthink the process far too much. I don't overthink things too much. I like to get the content out so that they can get started with their podcast. And I want to leave you with this. Now, if I were to tell you that the Foo Fighters were one of the best bands out there, would you agree or disagree? And maybe most of you would say that you agree. Maybe there are some of you that would say that you disagree. But the Foo Fighters would not be one of the biggest bands out there today if they did not have imperfections. If you go back, and what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to leave a link for this particular video in the description down below. And there's this video of Butch Vig, the Foo Fighters producer, and of course there's some footage of Dave Grohl and all the members of the Foo Fighters saying that, when we go in and we record our music with imperfections, because that's what rock and roll is all about. These days, when we record in digital audio workstations, yeah, we can go in and say that's close enough and then call it a day. But sometimes having those imperfections are what make your brand or what make your podcast more interesting. So again, I want to give you that link down in the description below. I want you to check that video out, because I think it's very important to remember that the perspective on what your podcast is about may not be the perspective that you should be implementing for other people. I hope that makes sense. If you like this video, go ahead and leave it a thumbs up. And of course, make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit that bell button. Get notified whenever I drop a brand new video. And again, I want to thank you guys so much for listening and watching this YouTube video. If you're listening to this, because I am planning on creating a podcast for this particular channel to take these videos and put them onto different platforms, because I've been getting a lot of requests from people saying that they want these in audio format. And I feel like now is the time to start doing that, just because I know there are people out there that are audio listeners than they are video listeners. So again, thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and I'll be talking to you guys real soon.